So, my name is Isaac and I'm an 11-year-old boy who has a massive passion for wildlife, the environment and recycling. So today we'll be challenging the mayor to see how well she knows what items go in which bin. So cue the first item.
A coffee cup. If I didn't bring my reusable coffee cup, I would be putting this in the general waste bin.
The lid would go in the recycling bin because that actually can be recycled, rather the cup can't. It has to be put in the landfill because it has a plastic lining around the middle.
Wow, I would have thought it would have been the other way around. So, lid in the recycling and the cup in the general waste.
Perfect.
An aerosol can. Isaac, I reckon I would put this in the general waste bin.
In fact, it actually goes in the recycling bin.
Okay. Banana peel. Food waste. It'll go in the green bin.
Very good.
A nappy. So if you're using disposable nappies, they'd have to go in general waste.
Yes, they do go in general waste.
Batteries. I would say they would go in the general waste bin.
Well, they can go in the general waste bin, but they can also be dropped off at e-waste bins where they reuse the parts of the batteries to make new ones.
Like at our libraries.
Exactly.
So empty pizza box, pretty clean, recycling bin.
Good. It does go in the recycling, but if it's overpacked with food, it has to go in the landfill bin.
All right. Broken glass. I would say, well, glass goes into the recycling bin.
Well, all glass does go in the recycling besides broken glass. Broken glass can't actually be recycled.
Kitty litter. Surely it has to be general waste.
Yes, it does have to go into the general waste bin.
And does that go with dog droppings as well?
Yes, dog droppings do go in the general waste bin.
An empty toothpaste tube, general waste?
Yes, it does go in the general waste.
Plastic cutlery. Well, it's plastic, but I would say it's a softer plastic maybe, so I would say general waste if you can't buy your bamboo cutlery.
Exactly.
What have we got here? Old clothes. So if they have to go into waste, I would say recycling?
No, they would have to go into the landfill bin. It is a great idea to donate them to the salvos or op shops.
All right, Isaac. So how did I do?
You did pretty good.
So I suppose at Moonee Valley, we know that it's difficult and we know sometimes you make mistakes, but what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for everyone. But Isaac, thank you so much. I know that I'll be better at knowing what goes in which bin, and hopefully Moonee Valley residents will be as well.
Thank you, it was my pleasure.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Samantha Byrne. I'm the Mayor of the City of Moonee Valley. Some of you may have seen the video where Isaac challenged me on what to put in the various bins. Well, now it's my turn to exact revenge on you, Isaac. So I have a few questions to ask you. What do you reckon?
Awesome. Give it a shot.
Sounds good, let's do this. Okay, Isaac, first question. How much rubbish does Moonee Valley produce each week? Is it A, 255 tonnes, B, 358 tonnes, C, 454 tonnes, or D, 551 tonnes?
Oh, that's a hard one. Maybe, I'm thinking probably D.
Close. The answer is C, 454 tonnes. Next question. How much of Moonee Valley's recycled materials end up in landfill due to contamination? Is it A, 5%, B, 9%, C, 18%, or D, 28%?
I'm gonna lock in D again. 28%.
Lock it in?
Yep.
You sure of your answer?
Yep.
The correct answer is C, 18%. Okay, Isaac, question number 3. What microelements can be found in the fish we eat? Is it A, microaluminium, B, microgranite, C, microplastics, or D, microsteel?
I'm thinking microplastics.
You're going to lock in answer C?
I sure am.
Correct. Do you have any more information on that?
Well, microplastics is the breaking down of plastic materials. Fish can see them as food to eat, and then when we eat the fish, we're actually digesting the microplastics as well.
Next question. Each year, 24 billion tonnes of fertile soil is lost to erosion. Roughly how many years of topsoil does the world have left? Is it A, 6 years, B, 60 years, C, 600 years, or D, 6,000 years?
I'm thinking B, 60 years.
Do you want to lock that in?
Yep.
Well done, Isaac. That's correct, 60 years. By the year 2027, it is estimated Moonee Valley will produce how many tonnes of waste each year? Is it A, 47,000 tonnes, B, 53,000 tonnes, C, 57,000 tonnes, or D, 59,000 tonnes?
I'm gonna lock in A.
You sure you want to lock it in?
Yeah?
The answer is C, 57,000 tonnes. The next question, how many water bottles are purchased around the world every minute? Is it A, 100,000, B, 500,000, C, 750,000, or D, 1 million?
I'm gonna lock in 500,000.
The correct answer is D, 1 million. That's a lot, isn't it?
That is a lot.
Okay, the next question. Plastic bags can take up to 1,000 years to decompose. What is the average usage time of a plastic bag? Is it A, 12 minutes, B, 12 hours, C, 12 days, or D, 12 weeks?
Probably, I'm gonna lock in A, 12 minutes.
You sure you want to lock that in?
Yep.
Yeah. It's correct. 12 minutes. In a single year, how much food do Australians throw in the bin? Is it A, $2 billion worth, B, $4 billion worth, C, $6 billion worth, or D, $8 billion worth?
I'm gonna lock in C.
The correct answer is in fact D,
Oh wow.
$8 billion worth. Thanks so much for joining me today, Isaac. It is so great to see kids like you so passionate about this topic, because at the end of the day, you are our future.
Thank you, it's my pleasure to be here.
Welcome everyone to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 11th of February 2020, which I now declare open. Before I begin, on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which we meet, that of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Council also extends this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone in the gallery, the very full gallery tonight, and also those people who are watching at home. Thank you for coming along and joining us. As well as being live streamed, this video recording of this meeting will be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. Now is a good time to also ask you to turn your mobile phones either off or onto silent, please. Now, councillors, I do have, for apologies and leave of absences, I have received a request for approved leave of absence from Councillor Lawrence for the period 11th of February to 26th of February inclusive. Can I please have a motion that Councillor Lawrence's leave be approved? Move Councillor Sorais, seconded Councillor Sypek. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday the 10th of December 2019 and the special meeting of Council held on Thursday the 30th of January 2020 please be confirmed? Is moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Cusack. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is unanimous. Councillors, does any councillor have a conflict of interest on any item on tonight's agenda in which they wish to declare? No. Now, councillors, we are now on to the item on the agenda, which is presentations. However, before I ask for the presentations for tonight, I'd like to acknowledge the recent passing of former councillor Hedley Moffat. Hedley was elected to council in the first Moonee Valley elections after amalgamations in 1997 and served one term. He was mayor in 1998. We acknowledge Hedley's contribution to our community and pass on our condolences to his family at this sad time. Now, councillors, I do believe there is another presentation tonight. Councillor Marshall?
Yes, and firstly, apologies for being so tardy in getting this to council, but we have received a beautiful book from Layla Karidi and Multicultural Arts Victoria entitled What Happened at the Pier, Recalling the Journey To, and talking about migration experiences.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Council, are there any other presentations tonight? Petitions and joint letters. Council, we have one petition being tabled tonight. Can I please have a mover for the petition in Keilor East? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This petition has been signed by 548 people. This petition's about the little bit of land where the sales office is, and if anybody remembers back in the late 90s, this Valley Lakes was going to be converted into a toxic waste dump, but it actually ended up becoming an estate where houses are being built there right now. Even I remember, ever since that day, it was always promised that this sales office would become a community facility. Now, this petition here is exactly the same as the petition that happened over 30 years ago when the community and the council got together and stopped the toxic waste dump, and they're going to come here as well to retain this property to have it community facilities. Let me make this very crystal clear. Council is not selling this land. This land is owned by Development Victoria and the state government. They are the ones that are selling it, and we are the ones that are going to have to do the planning to it. So just to make it crystal clear, council is not selling this land, and we've had a lot of keyboard warriors putting out information out there saying that council is selling this land and it's a disgraceful decision. It's not council, it's Development Victoria.
But tonight you're tabling to receive and note the petition, to refer it to, well, would you like to say what you're moving?
Yes, I will, Madam Mayor. I would like to, that Council receive this petition for 548 signatures requesting that the land at 45 Valley Lake Boulevard be used as a commercial space and not a profit-making venture.
Councillor Sypek, perhaps if you would...
Yeah,
maybe
move the officer's recommendation.
if you would mind just reading that off the screen.
I brought my wrong glasses, so could someone else read it for me, please?
I'll do that, Madam Mayor, if you wish me to.
Would Councillor Sorais, therefore,
Thank you.
would you like to move this?
So I'll move the proposed sale of land at 45 Valley Lake Boulevard, Valley Lakes, Keilor East, that Council resolves to 1. Receive and note the petition, 2. Refer this matter to the Group Manager Planning for investigation and reporting back to Council, 3. Advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais.
Councillor Sorais.
And Councillor Sypek, therefore, are you seconding that?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so just in terms of what we're resolving, in case that got a bit confusing on that petition, I will put that to the vote, just receiving the petition. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We are now up to public question time, and we have received questions from one community member tonight, so I'll invite Miriam Powell to come to the lectern to read her first question. Thank you, Miriam.
Is it on? Okay, great. So, hundreds of community members who fought hard to save trees around Newmarket Station were very relieved at the agreement reached between Moonee Valley Council and Metro Trains to save red. And we would like you to have this photograph, which I took of red as a thank you. While we await further details about the engineering solutions and the other 9 trees, residents have some interim queries in 2 parts. Firstly, given that it is agreed that red is not an immediate threat to the safety of people in this public space, is there anything Moonee Valley Council can do to have the fence removed, as it currently blocks a drinking tap, bins, a playground, seating and public space? And secondly, is Council satisfied that the wall bracing currently in place, located very close to red on top of the root zone, is not negatively impacting red's health in any way?
Thank you, Miriam. Before we accept that beautiful picture, I will ask Vincent Kamel, the General Manager of City Development, to respond to your first question.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, in response to the first part of your question, we do note at this point in time Council is still waiting on formal written notification from Metro that the red gum tree will be retained permanently. Council have also requested that Metro remove the fencing at the earliest opportunity in order to allow the access to key public facilities. This also includes advising the community of when this will be done. In response to the second part of your question, the wall bracing is not impacting the health of the tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Miriam, would you like to ask your second question?
Residents are very keen to have a more constructive relationship with Metro Trains, in which there is discussion about upcoming works, consultation and long-term planning for the heritage station and landscaping. What can Council do to help residents develop a better working relationship with Metro that will facilitate long-term planning for the station precinct, potentially also including celebration of Flemington's Indigenous and colonial history?
Thank you, Miriam. Vincent Kamel?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, Council will request that Metro work closely with the community and stakeholders. The aim is to establish an ongoing relationship that can ensure high standards of maintenance, local stewardship and explore how to celebrate the Indigenous and colonial history of the station and environs. Council is willing to facilitate any future meetings. Given that Metro, Council and the community all agree that public safety in the area is critical, it is important that Metro provide details of when a full station upgrade, including the station building to remove the temporary underpinning, Landscaping and CCTV is to be undertaken. Hearing directly from the community will allow all feedback to be taken into consideration by Metro prior to the programming of works and the lodging of planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Now I suppose it's time to get the picture. Maybe our ward councillors potentially could all, if you, Jim, if you would like to accept the photo on behalf of the city. Make sure you show it to the camera as well.
Thank you, Mira. Thanks for taking the time out to a very prominent place. Cheers. Thank you. Pass on our regards to the rest of the community.
Thank you, Jim. I'm mindful what you said probably wasn't caught in the mic, so if you wanted to say a couple of words, just a couple.
All I said in accepting this was that it's a very powerful picture and a very important image of Big Red. The other part of it was that Council's very thankful for all the work that the community has done in this, and thank you in particular for taking the time out to do this for us. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the ward councillors and all of the councillors and the community, and so many people to thank in regards to Big Red. Okay, now I don't believe there are any reports from special committees tonight, so we'll move on to item 10 on the agenda. 10.1. The first report on the agenda is a planning application for 54 to 56 Halsey Road, Airport West. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation that the officers have put forward, which is that Council issues a notice of decision to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application MV 179/2019 for the use and development of the land for the hiring of motor vehicles, display of business identification signs and reduction in bicycle parking requirements at number 54 to 56 Halsey Road, Airport West, in brackets land in consolidation 155407, subject to the conditions, which there are 12 of that I will not read out necessarily, but they are up on the board and they are printed in the agenda that is available to the public that are in the gallery.
So just confirming you are moving the officer's recommendation.
Correct.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Both yourself and I were at the public consultation with the residents. There are a couple in the gallery here tonight where there was a fairly reasonable discussion taking place about concerns that the residents that are abutting this property had. There have been, from that consultation, there has been some positive feedback in regards to soundproofing of fencing, some altered restrictions of parking to the neighbouring properties, and I will just make a note and just read a couple of those proposals that have come about since the application was considered. So the proposed hours of operation associated with the use is to commence at 7:30. Discussions at the consultation meetings sought the hours of operation to be amended so that weekend start times are at 8 a.m. in order to protect the amenity of the residential properties, specifically that of 58 Halsey Road, Airport West. So taking into consideration the immediate residential abuttal and the built form aspects of the subject site, the officer recommendation was that the hours of operation for the use remain at 7:30 at all times, with the exception of the westernmost portion of the site, which abuts 58 Halsey Road. It is considered that the built form of the building itself presents as a buffer to any vehicles associated with the use, as they are on the eastern side of the building away from the residential properties, and as such, the commencement time should remain at 7:30. However, noting that the westernmost portion of the site is most sensitive, that a further restriction by way of a permit condition in brackets 6C, which recommends that any fleet vehicles must only operate along the western boundary of the site from 9 a.m. every day. This gives further amenity protection to the residential property at all times, not just on weekends, whilst also adding an extra hour to the discussed time. And in addition, there is a condition, which is condition 5, that recommended which requires that an acoustic report be provided, which requires an assessment, undertake any noise attenuation measures required to be implemented to protect all immediately adjoining residential properties. And this will further give noise protection measures to the residents aside of the hours of operation. There was also questions raised in regards to parking restrictions at the front of 58 Halsey Road. So Council's Traffic and Transport have advised that parking changes are proposed for the northern side of Halsey Road, specifically to extend the 2-hour parking restriction to in front of 58 Halsey Road. And it is noted that this is a specific concern that the objector raised, and Council's Traffic and Transport Unit has also been directly in touch with the objector to discuss this matter. So whilst it's not an ultimate decision that I personally would have liked to have followed through, if we were to refuse this, the other possible options may produce a worse outcome. So there are 12 conditions there that rectify most of those issues that were raised by the objectors, and hopefully that this will go through.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, I'm happy to support ward councillors who have been involved in the consultation meeting for this proposal. I understand that many negotiations were had at the consultation meeting between the applicant and the residents. And as Councillor Soares said, there's been outcome from those discussions, so happy to support. I know Halsey Road well, used to work in Halsey Road, so I know the area quite well, and happy to support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Marshall.
I'm happy to speak in support of the motion, but I have to say I still do have some reservations, particularly around the hours of operation. And I do because in parts of the world that are down south, we often have this issue where there are interfaces between commercial and residential properties, and issues that you may not expect to happen, that what might be planned to be 9 all of a sudden becomes 8, and the issues that go along with enforcement. So I really hope that if this is approved, that the operator complies with those hours of operation, and that our officers are very aware of that and mindful of it. Note the comments that you made about the other noise mitigation measures, but so with all of that, I think I'm on balance happy to support, but I do still have that gnawing concern about the hours of operation, so I hope I am proven wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Soares, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchmarici, Councillor Marshall. All those against? Councillor Sypek. The motion is carried. With the officer's recommendation. Correct. We are now moving on to item 10.2 on tonight's agenda. The next item is a planning application at 4 Beaver Street, Aberfeldy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just got an alternative motion to propose.
Thank you.
I'll read it out if I could. So we've got endorsement conditions in front of us. There are just a couple of amendments to a couple of the conditions. So 1A1 is as is. 1A2 should read the finished floor level of the basement to be 36 RL. 1A3 should be reduce the basement floor to ceiling height to create a head height clearance of 2.1 metres at its narrowest point.
You can just slow down just so I can catch up on the screen. What was that one?
Provide the minimum head height clearance of 2.1 metres within the basement. I'm at its narrowest point. I'm reading the original motion here. I didn't have included along the ramp. I don't know where that's come from. Yeah, I didn't include that. Can you just take out, please, within to read it as it was? So I'm looking at the original endorsement conditions here. So reduce the basement floor to ceiling height.
Councillor Sharp, do you risk for an adjournment, or do you think you'll be
No,
able to?
shouldn't need an adjournment, no. Or provide a minimum, I don't know where that's come from. Where's Petrus? He's not here. Maybe just say, I don't know where this ramp has come from. So provide a minimum, sorry Alison, go back to how you had it. Provide a minimum head height clearance of 2.1 metres within the basement and just leave it there. I don't know what along the ramp will do. 1A4, provide ramp changes as it progresses into the site in accordance with the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and the relevant Australian standard. 1A5 as is. 1B as is. 1C to be deleted. And then the renumbering, so 1 becomes 1C, pedestrian visibility displays illustrated and noted, that's as is. 1E as is, or 1D as is, 1E as is, 1F as is, 1G needs to be changed to revised screening measures for each dwelling to ensure compliance with standard B22 of clause 55.046, overlooking and standard. Yep. And standard B23 of clause 55.047, internal views of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, with a preference for permanent aluminium screens on rear windows along the top stories, and all other conditions remain as is.
Councillor Sharp, sorry to be frustrating here. I might, just for complete clarity, if we can just, we've got time, we'll just read it all out, just because I think there was a bit of jumping around. You're right to read it off the screen if you're happy?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Just to make sure we all know
all of
what
them,
we're...
or just changes?
I think everything.
All of them, okay. So endorsement conditions, 1A, a modified design including 1, the front setback balcony to be 7.9 metres from the front boundary for each dwelling. 1A2, the finished floor level of the basement to be 36 MRL. 1A3, provide minimum head height clearance of 2.1 metres within the basement. 1A4, provide ramp grade changes as it progresses into the site in accordance with the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and the relevant Australian standard. 1A5, lowered building height and design as a result of conditions 1A to 1A1 to 4. B, complete front and side cross-section elevation clearly showing the extent of the basement level. C, pedestrian visibility displays illustrated and noted on either side of each crossover in accordance with the design standard access ways of clause 52.069 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. The provision of D, the provision of 300mm trench grates to the at the bottom of each garage. E, a notation on the plans to state permeable across the ground floor plan, landscape plan and storm plan in accordance with standard B9 of clause 55.03 for permeability of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. F, revised screening measures for each dwelling to ensure with standard B22 of clause 55.04-6, overlooking and standard B22 of clause 55.04-7, internal views of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme with a preference for permanent aluminium screens on rear windows along top stories. G, the WSUD detail in accordance with condition 5. H, all stormwater treatment measures and associated annotations as a result of condition 3. I, a notation on the plans outlining the tree protection measures in accordance with condition 11 and 12. And J, an amended landscape plan in accordance with condition 4. And everything else is as is.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. So you're moving as is on the screen?
Yes.
Can I just ask, as a point of clarification, Councillor Sharp, in relation to how you read out the first part, about the 2.1 metres when you said within the basement and along the ramp. I'm just wondering why it wouldn't be along the ramp.
I didn't include the ramp. The ramp wasn't included originally, and I never mentioned the ramp in my proposed alternative, so I don't know where the ramp has come from.
I'm just wondering from an engineering perspective, can we have an officer clarify? Does that need to be to work?
We've got a motion on the floor. We might get that clarified.
Thanks.
Once it's can I ask for a point of clarification? Can it come now?
It would just be material as to whether
It wasn't original.
I will throw that to our Chief Executive.
I suppose the challenge is really where the bottom of the ramp meets that basement level. So unfortunately, unless I see the plans, I couldn't determine if that's an issue or not, but it's something we can deal with when the plans come to council, I would have thought.
Councillor Marshall, does that answer your point of clarification, or would you like to ask an additional point of clarification?
I'm not sure that there will be anyone else here who's able to answer my question in a sense. As long as we make sure, I just don't want this to not work.
All I can say is it wasn't on there originally, and I didn't have reference.
We're just trying to, if you've got another point of clarification, Councillor Gauch-Marici?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the point of clarification around removing that ramp section, there's a bedroom or study of balcony that overhangs the ramp. Would that section overhanging the ramp not still need to have a head height clearance of at least 2.1 metres?
I will ask the Chief Executive.
Not the basement,
to
it's a
respond.
building overhanging it.
Yeah, it certainly would need to do that, yes. But I haven't seen the plans. I can't definitively say that's the case, but certainly would need to make sure that the clearance is appropriate. It's something that could be dealt with as part of the plans when they come in, I think, when we assess them from an engineering point of view.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councillor Marshall, you have moved what is on the screen. Do I have a... Sorry, what did I say? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sharp, you have moved what is on the screen. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I think I'll just provide a little bit of background to this application, as I called this application in to be decided by full council. So late last year, the planners advised the applicant that this proposal was going to be refused. The applicant, who is a long-term resident of the area, was very upset over this and obviously contacted councillors regarding this application, as he felt that over the previous 18 months or so, many changes to the proposal had been made or had been requested by the planners, and all changes requested had been made by the applicant. Hence his dismay to learn that the application was going to be refused. So when I received the email, I had a look at the plans, and knowing what else is being built in Beaver Street, I pretty much drive through Beaver Street every day. What's being built currently, and certainly the new type of dwellings along that stretch, I wanted a further opportunity to evaluate this planning application. Hence, I've called this proposal in. One of the main concerns of the planners, from what I understand, has been the number of steps leading up to the front door of the development of the proposal. Now, it's a side-by-side 2-unit development. The side of Beaver Street that this proposal is located on is the lower side of the road, and considering there is an apartment block being built nearly directly opposite, and certainly very similar designs close by, I feel that the evaluation of the proposal is at odds with the character of the street, what is the character of the street now, rather than what it used to be. Hence, my recommendation refers to some minor adjustments to the proposed height, which I note the applicant has been more than happy to make. There's just a couple of other minor amendments that flow on from that adjustment to the height. But at the end of the day, it's a simple 2-unit development application, and I hope that my fellow councillors can support these minor changes in this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on this motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sharp, for bringing this item to us to the full council meeting. I too agree with most of what you said. This is a side-by-side, and I think that the applicant has made quite a lot of concessions here, and I'm happy with the alterations that you've put forward. Thank you, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.3 is a report on the proposed sale of land from formerly discontinued road at 112 St Leonard's Road, Ascot, Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Yes. I will move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Look, this in the ordinary course would be a pretty simple matter, but we've got the complicating factor here that 40 years has elapsed, or over 40 years, since this process initially commenced, and that obviously creates some difficulties. And what we know is that in 1977, the two owners at 112 and 114 St Leonard's Road in Ascot Vale made a joint application at the time to have the subject land discontinued as a road and to sell the land to the owners. So the road was discontinued. We know that happened. We know that part of the land was transferred to the owner of 114, but for reasons that we're not sure about, the transfer of the other part of the road to 112 St Leonard has never occurred. And that's difficult for us because obviously we don't know why it didn't occur, and this all happened many, many years ago. In 2018, there was a request from the owner of 112 St Leonard's to actually complete that transfer, and you can see the report sets out what is probably best described as a difference of opinion in relation to the neighbours about what should actually happen. And we're in that difficult situation where I think that the only prudent thing we can do in this instance is to start that statutory process over again. We don't know, as I said, that time that's elapsed, relying on a resolution from over 40 years ago where you don't know the circumstances why it wasn't carried out, to me is too fraught. And so we'll have that usual process. Obviously, interested parties can make submissions, and if needs be, we'll have a committee of the ward councillors to hear those submissions and make a decision from there.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Marshall has explained, there's a 42, almost 43-year history in regards to this particular parcel of land and who it belongs to, which is laid out in the report. I guess just to go further from what Councillor Marshall said, if this motion gets up, it is not us ruling in favour of either the owner at 1112 or 114. It's just the commencement of a section 223 where both those owners and any other interested party can make a submission, both written and then present to ward councillors, and then full council receives a further report as to whether or not we should proceed with the proposed sale or not. So this is somewhat procedural. This is not making a decision, and as Councillor Marshall has said, this is a prudent and practical way forward, and hopefully we ultimately get a resolution in this land issue that has dragged on for 42 years, according to the reports.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a report on the proposed road discontinuance, right-of-way and road reserve abutting rear of 20 Clarence Street, Flemington. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Sorry, Mayor,
Councillor.
I'm happy to move the recommendation in the officer's report as the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Cusack.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell whether my microphone was on or not. This is a reasonably straightforward application. The property at the end of Clarence Street, at the rear of it, has been used for some time for an extension of the house at 20 Clarence Street. They have made a formal approach to council to acquire the land, and an investigation of this property has shown that that the proposal is not likely to either impact on current households that rely on the rear exit onto this laneway for use of cars or for other purposes, and the childcare centre is not impacted either. So in terms of investigating that, council has come to the conclusion that we would go through the statutory procedures to discontinue the road, and direct that under sections 207A and 223 of the Act, public notice would be given to the Moonee Valley leader, inform people who wish to be heard in support of the submission that they will be heard by a committee of council comprising of ward councillors, which is similar to the previous motion, and resolves that the public notice required to be given under the Act should state that if the road is discontinued, council proposes to sell the road to the abutting owner for market value, and finally receives a report. It's, in my mind, a fairly straightforward motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Only to say that as per the previous report, this is not making a ruling or a decision as to whether or not to proceed with the sale. It kickstarts the process outlined by Councillor Cusack, and again, interested parties have the chance to lodge a submission with council, speak or present to ward councillors, and then ultimately the matter comes back before us as a full council.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Agenda item 10.5 is the 2019-2020 Capital Works Program update. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sypek?
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sorais. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is pretty much straightforward with the Capital Works program, so I've had a good read through this, and I'm happy to move everything that the officers recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't at the briefing last week, so I just had one or two questions, if I may. They may have been raised at that. If I may present those, I'll ask them.
So you've got points of clarification?
I guess point of clarification. So on page 5 of 7 of the attachment, under the Essendon Rowing Club, I just wanted to know if there was any response from them in regards to their feedback as to where the female change rooms were going to be established.
So I'm mindful of the officers that are around the table. I'm happy to
take that on notice.
Send that through to Vincent Kamal, who may be able to answer your point of clarification.
Through the Mayor, I can't give you full detail in regard to the communication, but can say we are reviewing the project itself in regard to the proposal, what it looks like, how it's integrated into the building, and the broader intention of what can be achieved there within budget figures. So we have stepped back from what's there to ensure we actually challenge the various aspects to ensure it's a good quality delivery for the club, and we'll be coming to you with further information of that as we go forward.
Thank you. It's just that the response was supposed to come back at the end of January. I was just wanting to know whether we had a response. Obviously that's still being negotiated. Thank you. And I just want to make a comment on a couple of the items.
So is this your speaking now, or you've got another?
I'm speaking to the
report.
Speak
ahead. Go ahead.
Just in relation to the Military Road and Clarendon Street traffic signals, finally, it's like, nearly 2 years down the track. So I can see that we've got detailed design has been adopted and the tender documentation, so hopefully that can be carried through fairly quickly as opposed to the amount of time it's taken to get to this. And the other query, it's not really a query, it's a little bit disappointing though, about the LATAM study implementation at Airport West. This is for the plan and designs. It was adopted by Council and the community are being advised. I suppose this is a clarification as to whether or not that consultation has gone out as yet to the community in Airport West about the design work.
The consultation for the LATAM has... I'm happy to refer that to... Sorry. Are you happy? Vincent, Kamal?
Through the Mayor, apologies, I will have to take that on notice and send a response out tomorrow, if that's all right.
Thank you. I'm happy for that.
Thank you. Did you want to continue speaking on the item, Councillor Soares?
They were the only queries I had. Thank you.
No problems. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, we get these reports periodically with Capital Works, and obviously these reports always signal extra expenses to certain projects, and obviously we don't always see when we have savings, and obviously sometimes we do have savings. There are a couple of projects noted within the report here that I am quite bugged by, I suppose, to put it lightly, and the fact that we're spending more money, and you can say it's not a really large amount, but it certainly adds up. Pram crossings in Kerford and McCulloch Street, an extra 22,000, so it's gone up from a proposed budget of 40 odd to 60 odd. Kerford and McCulloch Street aren't pedestrian routes, they're quiet back residential streets, and I'm just concerned about the money that we're spending I'm not saying it's certainly not warranted, but pram, ramp and zebra crossings are pretty basic things, and to have a quote go up, from 40 to 60, that's like 20 odd %. That's a fair jump in a quote, or I don't even know if the work started, and maybe it's an evaluation of the job that started, I'm not sure. And I've seen firsthand some work that's been done that really, what I want to say I probably can't say, but I just can't see the benefit of spending 100 odd thousand for works to some streets and then needing to spend an extra 23,000. And there's comments here on this variation, alterations to Bluestone Curb and Channel, I haven't seen any of those. Alterations to Telstra Pits, haven't seen any of that work either. So I'm just concerned about particularly a couple of items in this list here, particularly those two. And again, that's another 23,000 for that project. And if you actually saw what was done within that project, where they're wanting an extra 23,000, you actually couldn't believe it. I can't believe that we've done work for that amount, and really there's no benefit. There's no benefit to the wider community. So I can't support this Capital Works report as it is. Unfortunately, it's probably the only Capital Works report in my whole time on council probably that I haven't supported, but can't do that tonight. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No, as there was dissent. Councillor Sypek, would you like to close?
No, happy to leave it at that.
No problems. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Give me a hand up.
Councillor Soares, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchmarici, Councillor Marshall. All those against? Councillor Sharp. The item is carried. Item 10.6 on the agenda is the financial performance report for December 2019. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. I'd like to move that consideration of this report be deferred to the ordinary council meeting on 25th February 2020.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Gauci Marici. Councillor Marshall.
Just very briefly, there are a number of matters, queries that we just need to have confirmed, and this report will be considered by the Audit Committee next week too, and then we can have it come back to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Gauci Marici.
I think Councillor Marshall has explained, but just, I guess, for those who wonder why these things happen, sometimes there are different interpretations of words or consistencies in standards and things that we just wanted to seek some clarification on and to understand more before we approved. So,
thank you, Councillor Gauci Marici. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item of business is notice of motion, and lucky us, we have 5. So item 11.1 on tonight's agenda is the notice of motion number 2020-01, relationship building between Moonee Valley Sporting Clubs and clubs in fire-affected East Gippsland. I call on Councillor Sypek to present his notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to take notice that the ordinary meeting of Council to be held on the 11th of February 2020, it is my intention to move that Council receive a report on the ways in which it can support building relationships between sporting clubs in Moonee Valley and other community clubs in severely impacted fire-affected municipality of East Gippsland. The report could be considered a range of activities such as supporting fundraising by local clubs and events which promote relationship building.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. I'm mindful that you had a word slightly different than on the screen, but I believe Moonee Valley and clubs in the severely affected, fire-affected is what you're moving?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. And seconded by Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on your motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been in contact with Councillor Dick Ellis from the East Gippsland, and we were talking during the bushfires, and we knew that once the fires are out, there was going to have to be a lot of rebuilding afterwards. And we've got a lot of sporting clubs, even like community clubs like bridge clubs or bowls clubs. And the idea between the both of us was to build relationships between Moonee Valley clubs that they might have a practice match down there. So go down there for a weekend, go into the hotels, bring down your esky, and then come back and just support the local community down there, and just a bit of tourism. So that's just one option, but there are all sorts of other options. And Councillor Ellis gave me a list of all the clubs and community groups down there, and I'm happy to share them with any of the clubs or community groups here in Moonee Valley. And if it's possible that we can do something to help in our small way, I think it's a good option.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp.
Congratulations to Councillor Sypek. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Congratulations to Councillor Sypek for putting up this notice of motion. I think it's certainly a worthy idea. I think all of us know that all our sporting clubs are doing huge things as it is, but if we can help them along in any way we can and join, it's all about joining the dots all the time. So if this notice of motion helps those dots to be joined and gets people together and helping those severely impacted communities, I think well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak to this item? Councillor Gauci Marici.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Similarly, I would really like to congratulate Councillor Sypek on bringing this forward. I have spent significant amounts of time in the last 15 years in Gippsland with my previous role, and seeing the communities that have been impacted as part of these fires, but over a number of fires in the past. I think for us to build really strong relationships there is an amazing outcome. And I think the inclusion of community clubs is another really nice one, because you've got Rotary clubs, for example, that work with Blaze Aid in rebuilding fences, and can partner with some clubs up there. And particularly the idea of us transferring some of our tourism business, so local sporting clubs go up there and have a weekend and engage in the restaurants and the hotels and everything else, is a really nice opportunity. So I really look forward to seeing where this partnership goes, and I can't wait to see some of the outcomes and to attend some of the games. So,
thank you, Councillor Gauci Marici. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Cusack.
Yep. Well, thank you, Councillor Forsyth, for bringing this motion to council. We really need to move very quickly as a council. A lot of the community is well in front of us and doing lots and lots of stuff, and I know that a lot of our sporting clubs are well down that track. One of the critical issues that I know a number of the sporting clubs have who have raised money has been to where to focus it and how to best use it, and whether to put it in with the large groups and organisations that are collecting funds. But getting sporting club to sporting club has a number of really important well-being and community building aspects to it. And I'll give you an example because, and it's basically what I know, the Moonee Valley Bowling Club over the last 3 weeks has raised $5,500. It's got 90 members. And they put the asset on all of their sponsors and all the rest of it to do that. So in that consideration, what were they going to do with it? So they thought about the Bendigo Bank and putting it in there, but in fact they've been in touch with the Malakuta Bowls Club. Great. The bowling club itself, the building wasn't badly burnt or anything like that, some smoke damage, but their greens are essentially really mucked up with, and all the surrounding fences have all been burnt out and so on like that. So that money will go directly to that bowling club. There's already a plan on how to get down there with the bowlers from here down there, and they're all local community people ready to do it. So what I'm asking the officers to do when they consider the next part of your motion, or the part of your motion which talks about getting a report and coming to us, is about how the council can use it, make its facilities available to sporting clubs. E.g., if you're going to go down there, can we get the community bus and do it on the El Cheapo? Can we do the practical things like bring up juniors from those sporting clubs who have been somewhat traumatised by all of this, who haven't been able to start their football season, and bring them up here and maybe organise some way for them to play football up here for a little bit, do practice matches, be billeted out and stuff like that. And our council can facilitate that sort of stuff through its youth workers and so on like that, now youth officers, pardon me. And so there's a number of really important other links that we can do so that those communities feel that, A, we're looking to care for them and therefore give an outlet for our sporting clubs to do something, but we need to be the grease that oils those wheels. So I take your point, and I think it's an excellent idea, and I'm looking forward to inventive reporting from our officers about how it can be really worked up.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 11.2, I call on Councillor Sypek to present his second notice of motion entitled Size Option for Green Waste Bins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to take notice, the ordinary meeting of Council will be held on 11th February 2020. It is my intention to move that Council receive a report on the viability of offering residents a choice of a smaller green waste bin, taking into account smaller residency and smaller families and lone person households in the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder? Oh, so, sorry, I saw Councillor Sarace first.
Competing with you.
I was looking at Councillor Sypek. I think, apologies. Councillor Sarace, are you seconding? Yes, thank you. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As I'm the responsible authority in my household to do the green waste, I was mowing the lawn only about, I'd say about 6 months ago, when one of my neighbours came past, and they live in the side-by-side, and they started telling me that their food scraps they had to throw into landfill, and the little bit of lawn that they had to cut had to go into landfill. And he actually gave me the idea of, I thought, well, why don't we just have a smaller green waste bin for some of these smaller residencies, because, it saves going to landfill. And it's a very simple option. The small red bins that we have, the 125 litre ones, we could just put green tops on them and they become a smaller green waste bin. Now, there could be a possibility where a dual occupancy or side by side, or 3 units on one block, they could actually even use one bin between the whole 3 of them. So I think this will work very, very well. Probably won't work in multi-storey buildings where there's not much open space, but where there is a little bit of open space and where there is a little bit of grass to be cut, I think these bins would work well, and it'll be an opt-in. It won't be a compulsory option.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Salinas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sypek, for putting forward this notice of motion. I think the demographics of our residential living and lifestyle have changed dramatically over the last maybe 10 to 15 years. Hence, there's not so much a need that a lot of people don't have a lawn, so they don't have the waste disposal of grasses, etc., to put into those bins. It's not required. I, for one, am one of those people. I live on my own. I have fake grass in my small little courtyard garden. And as far as waste scraps, etc., I don't have a huge amount of wastage left over, and what I do, I put into a special little bag to go into the green bin. But basically, I think that this is a way moving forward of reducing our amount of wastage within the municipality that would help enhance, our support with climate change and everything else.
Thank you, Councillor Salinas. I'm mindful I don't know where to look here, but would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, and I commended Councillor Sypek last week for bringing this notice of motion before council, because it is an issue that is happening throughout our municipality, and I know Councillor Salinas has spoken about her lived experience. We're similar. We have a very small backyard, which, as my Instagram friends would know, has a lovely 3.5 metre wall getting built next to it, but that's a whole other matter. But it's probably about 5 or 6 square metres. We don't have any grass. We just have a few plant clippings, and we have food waste. And probably a year ago, when I went to council and asked for a green bin as a resident, I was told it was only the big 240 litre bin, and we do have a big 240 litre bin, but it's just the food scraps at the bottom. A couple of neighbours put their stuff in there, and it is such a large bin space, and in essence it discourages us from actually recycling green waste, because it's so impractical. Not also to mention that the 240 litre bin in a small carport also is quite large. So the concept of a 120 litre bin is fantastic. Hopefully, if this works, so we can look at the adaptation of getting an even smaller bin, which I know then would need to have the mechanisms for trucks to collect. But we need to do everything we can to encourage our residents to recycle, to encourage our residents to care about the environment. So making things easier is just such a practical step forward. So more than happy, Councillor Sypek, to support this motion, and I very much look forward to calling council downstairs at some stage and getting our 120 litre green bin and getting rid of that big large 240 litre bin. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I will throw to Councillor Marshall to speak on this item.
Thank you. Very happy to speak in support of this motion, Councillor Sypek. Council had originally planned to do a trial in an apartment context, and I was disappointed to find out recently that hadn't occurred for a range of reasons. So hopefully this will get that ball rolling. The reality is we know that food waste comprises a significant proportion of the stuff that goes to landfill, and that's obviously undesirable for a range of reasons. And I really hope this is one part of the whole puzzle that we need to look at when it comes to waste, because as a council, as a community, as a society, we need to look at a range of things obviously bin sizes, bin frequencies, the types of things that we can recycle, reuse, reduce. Certainly encouraging our commercial and industrial users in our municipality to make sure that they do try and recycle their green waste. So there are lots of levers that we can pull. And even this concept as to, we usually go for the private waste collections for multi-unit developments. Is that the right way to go? And these are all things that as a council we need to grapple with going forward. And this is an important part of that, because we need to get that food waste, and organic waste, out of our landfill. So very happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Gauchimerici.
I am similarly really pleased to support this motion. I am just mindful, though, of managing the expectations of some of our community members. I'm conscious that there might have been an article today that said that they would be hitting the streets quickly as soon as 100 green lids could be ordered. And I would just like to make sure that our community knows that the process that happens from here is a report comes back to us outlining what's possible and what's not, and would identify what the price would actually be, and then we would proceed from there. I just don't want for anyone to read the local article that suggested they'd be out next week at $20. So.
Right. $20. Well, we can also ensure that our comms team follows up. Thank you, Councillor Gauchimerici. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think that we need to really test the viability in the sense of, does the community want it? I think the community does. What we're testing a little bit, obviously, is how much the pound, shillings and pence goes and how we budget around it. And so, in a sense, I think we should express our willingness for this to really go forward. And so, therefore, John, Councillor Sypeck, you have my support in it. I think it's a bit of that old just make it happen stuff. I'm looking at this from another couple of perspectives, I suppose, and it's been raised here that already that people in our community are living in different lifestyles, and that there are many people who are living in multi-unit developments, whatever they may be, and are looking for ways for this to be addressed in their lifestyle, because they are very conscious of it. And so we do this in our workplaces and so on like that, so why not? And this is a great opportunity for this report to start thinking about the notion of integrating the lifestyle sort of thing with the environment, and where does waste go? And so therefore I would like to pitch that some of the thinking that has to go into this report is around what are the implications for planning and waste management plans, and in the future for when developments are being proposed of the type that you're talking about, and whether they can be encouraged to go down the track of thinking about this issue as a serious matter, rather than just providing a whole lot of bins that people just disappear stuff into. The other part of this is that we've had really successful initiatives in this community around the Small Gardens Initiative, and it has been an award winner that has gone out there, and we've done lots and lots of work around it. So there are many people in very small environments who are actually doing significant stuff with gardens. And just as Councillor Nation has pointed out, in a small space you might not have necessarily a whole lot of clippings, but you do need something that is going to be relevant to you. And I think this is the notion of how do you make this recycling process relevant to all of our community, and not just something that some people do. And I thought then that then also led me on to this other thing, which was about cooperation, and how we might actually look at that as part of a viability process, and how you can get more cooperative arrangements going. And finally, anybody in this community who has a green bin can actually get a second great big 240 litre one. I've had one for ages because I just seem to be able to fill it both of them all the time. But in sense of what about the viability of being able to get a second smaller bin rather than just the another big bin or whatever. So the whole thing balances on flexibility as much as having an interest in going to some of our policy areas and planning areas.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor, Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak on this?
I'm
You
the
don't
only
have
one.
to. I just thought I would.
I'm the only
No
councillor,
pressure.
but I'm happy to support Councillor Sypek. Another awesome notice of motion up tonight.
Thank you. Well, as there was no dissent and there was actually a fight for who seconded that, not that I knew it was going on, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. Item 11.3 on tonight's agenda is notice of motion number 2020-03, review of community funding guidelines for low-cost responsive services, and I call on Councillor Sypek
Thank
to
you, Madam Mayor.
present the third.
That also at tonight's ordinary meeting, the Council receive a report on a review of community funding guidelines, giving consideration to community needs for low-cost responsive services and assistance in a timely manner outside of the funding application timelines.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll probably just explain this a little bit more. We have a grant system that community groups, sporting clubs, anybody, individuals can apply for, and they do have a cycle timeline. But and I'll just give you a couple of examples of where this doesn't actually work properly. You have a tennis club who requested half a truckload of mulch just to fill up some garden beds that would have sunken over during the drought, and it was a tripping hazard. We couldn't provide that half a load of truckload of mulch because they had to apply for a grant to do that. Another club had a big overhanging branches onto the tennis courts. And this is all on council property, and they had to apply for a grant for council to cut our own tree. It just, I think the guidelines are a little bit too rigid, and it just needs a bit of flexibility to allow our officers to do what their professions are. And like our arborists can go out there and make a decision. Yeah, okay, we can lob that branch if it's causing interference. Yeah, we can bring some mulch. Or if a pothole opens up in one of the driveways of our sporting facilities, they don't have to go through a grant process to get a pothole filled. Then they're just some simple examples, but there are other examples that some of my colleagues will probably explain as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really supportive of this because when we looked at all of the grant stuff way back at the beginning of time and got rid of that slush fund notion of how money was allocated, it was put on the table at the time that there is a need for a level of flexibility with very small amounts of money to keep community groups going at times when the cycle, as you say, doesn't quite meet their need. And I'll give you a couple of examples as well for colleagues at this table. I'm thinking about there is a community lunches group that has been doing this voluntarily down in the Flemington area for several years. They've never asked for a razoo from this council. They go and collect the food from the local butchers. They collect bread from the local bakers down in Racecourse Road, and they're now working in with the food bank. They're feeding 3 days a week. They're feeding about 60 to 70 people in various church halls around Flemington. Now that started by just a group of people wanting to do something, but they need little things to get them going or on the side. Stuff like, something breaks, or there's not enough plates, or there's just little things. And they're happy to go down to the op shop and spend their own money. But in a sense, this is where council could be incredibly proactive, provide an opportunity for these groups to just get this small bit of money when they need it, and we get a return like you wouldn't believe. And I've often talked about the multiplier effect of what community puts in when it gets going through its volunteering. And there are studies around $1 of council's effort comes back 4 times fold. And in these situations, it comes back many times. And I'm thinking very, very clearly of all of those smaller groups that we've got around who are doing sustainability work, who just need, a tool or two or something like that that makes things happen. And so I do want to see if we can work our way through that whole thing of transparency, that whole thing around not, gifting stuff out and so on like that, and making sure that it all is above board, but that we also have the flexibility and nimbleness as an organisation to be able to respond quickly to a community groups putting up their hands, sort of saying, hey, we're a bit stuffed here, can you give us a chop out? We've got a few bucks in the bank, but we haven't got it quite enough to cover this off.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Marshall?
I'm happy to speak in support of it. I agree with it in principle. We certainly would need some rigour, obviously, around that, how you apply and reporting on what's done, and that would need to be in place just for transparency purposes. But, it's almost been embarrassing at times where you've had community groups come to you and say, it might be a couple of trees, something that is really for council of nominal value, and the response is you've got to go through a grant application process and be measured up against people who are asking for $20,000. So there's an imbalance there. It can't be a free-for-all, because ultimately these are still council and ratepayer resources. So that is absolutely clear, and there does need to be a clear path how you ask for them. So it's not just someone ringing up saying, can you do this for my mate? So that needs to be all totally dealt with. But as Councillor Cusack has just said, our community groups do so much. Some of them ask us for nothing. Some of them don't want to go through a community grants process and ask us for large amounts of money. They just want small things that council often could provide very easily. And the mulch is a very good example. We've had other examples of mulch, or wanting to mulch some Christmas trees and things like that, which again, for us, is a relatively small cost, but enormous benefit for those groups. So I'm very happy to support this, and we'll look forward to seeing the report if it's supported.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor? Councillor Sorais.
I actually have a point of clarification on this. It's just something that crossed my mind about these types of requests. Couldn't they come to us as councillors as a request for service, as a procedural, like we deal with other issues that come up? I kind of see it crossing over, where occasionally we'll get someone who says, could you please take care of that bit of footpath because it's elevated and it's a risk, it's a danger risk. Something like Councillor Sypek has mentioned, where perhaps a branch coming over needed to be logged.
I think, Councillor Sorais, you're asking why are these not coming through as a request for service, and I believe that the response to that is they potentially are, and we're saying, no, you need to go through the community grants. And so what Councillor Sypek has put forward is that we receive a report back to review the guidelines.
So that would be clarified through that report.
Now, did you want to speak on the item?
No, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on the item? Okay, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. Okay. Item 11.4, I call on Councillor Marshall to present her first notice of motion for tonight, entitled Construction Access to Public Sites. Thank you, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. I would like to move my microphone on, and I'd also like to move that the CEO brings a report back to an ordinary council meeting by no later than May 2020, considering the current process for allowing development construction related access to public sites owned and or operated by council, including local roads, car parks and open space, addressing 1, concerns regarding the impacts on businesses and residents, 2, the traffic, parking and other amenity issues the access can create, 3, whether council's default position should be to prohibit access unless it is an emergency or on a short-term basis. 4, how council could encourage areas where multiple construction sites are in place to share facilities to minimise construction impacts and the need for access to public sites. And 5, any other relevant issues.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on your notice of motion?
Thank you, and I think in some ways this almost does speak for itself, because I'm sure all of us can point out multiple examples where access has been granted and it has created issues for our community. And certainly in Moonee, where there's been a significant amount of construction development related activity, we've had lots of concerns around this exact issue. And we've had car parks shut off, road reserves being used, and they're often been for extended periods of time too, and that's one of the difficulties. And they've been permitted to allow, help facilitate the high density developments. And Moonee Ponds in particular, we just had, thank you for the patience shown by our CEO and my multiple requests into him and reports, but we had a situation on Taylor Street where there was an occupation of a road reserve for an extended period of time in an area where you have high numbers of traffic, pedestrian and other movements. We've certainly, in the Shooter Street car park, I wish I had $1 for every complaint I've had about the occupation there, again, often for extended periods of time. And it's clear there needs to be that balance, and I acknowledge that, and it's certainly not an easy issue, but we really need to think about those broader impacts on community and the broader impacts, including on traders, where we know parking is an issue, and if we are allowing access to be cut off for a period of time to help that development be, to allow it to be constructed in a way that's easier for the developer, then you sort of have to wonder whether we've got the balance right at the moment. So it's just asking for a report to consider these issues and ways that we can look at this a little more differently. And again, it'll be something that as construction activity moves further and further out in Moonee Valley, that other areas will have to grapple with.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack.
Well, we all know that construction sites have to have access. Tradespeople, people who are delivering goods and so on like that, and some of the really, really big trucks that are bringing in materials for these developments have to have access. We're not blind to that. But on the other hand, what we are seeing is, in that public domain, damage to public assets, and I know that's been already raised as a motion within council, but we do know that that's going on, and where that damage extends out from not just curb and channels being cracked and broken, for argument's sake, but onto public reserves and so on like that, we've got a significant issue. And I think that we really need to take care of that one. I think also built into this is that our community is consistently being asked to give up its amenity so that these things can be worked through, so that the developer gets what they want and maximises whatever they can out of the whole process. So I think that there needs to be some consideration again given into this thing, into this report, about some capacity for recompense for our community around this sort of thing. Maybe it's the same sort of part of that whole developer's contribution sort of issue. It may, I don't know, but it needs a bit of thinking. I think also I am so one of my pet beefs is where I consistently hear that developers pay the parking fines of their tradies and actually build into the wages or the conditions of employment or the contract that they have with tradies, where they will pick up X number of days worth of parking fines per week, and these guys therefore become a custom and practice gets set up where Cowboyville starts happening around the neighbourhood. And I just I'm flagging that one as a pet hate of mine, I suppose. But I think that we also are experiencing, and I know it's a police enforcement issue, but we also have that don't care aspect that comes into it from a lot of people who are on these sites. Yeah, I'll get there. Don't care about sort of what they're actually doing. They're not doing safe driving. They're pulling out into traffic as easy as pie. They're sometimes way, way away from anything around their own traffic controls and so on like that. So we have a number of enforcement issues that I think parallel this, and I would like to see them incorporated into the reporting. And it's, look, the message is that this is a really difficult place to be in. People are living, residents are living cheek to jowl with these developments, and people are putting up with early waking up times, machinery going on and all that sort of stuff, and are being asked to give but not being able to get any break in all of that unless they complain. And then all of a sudden they become the bad guys and the bad women for having stuck up their hand for something that is reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this notice of motion? Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Another awesome notice of motion up tonight. I thank Councillor Marshall for putting this up. We have so many issues in Buckley Ward with places used for construction that you look at and you think, oh, you really shouldn't be using that. For example, parking bays next to parks and things like that. So then residents don't have access to the park because they can't park their car there, and it's a long drawn out saga. So certainly happy to see this come before us. I hope we can get some really clear guidelines, and taking Councillor Cusack's point, yes, developments do need access, but residents need access to effectively what is parks and things are owned by everyone in the community. So, and parks just one example. Keilor Road's often blocked off too, but that's obviously Rick Roads. So happy to see what comes back in this report, and thank Councillor Marshall for putting it up.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor? Councillor Sypak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Marshall, for putting this up. And I was a victim of the Shooter Street blockade. I tried to get through there, and the whole road was blocked off because some lorry was, loading or unloading. Not only did they block off the road, they actually had the parking spot near the curb and channel. Plus, they took away a whole row of parking spots, and I couldn't believe how much space they took. Okay, look, if you block the road off for 5-10 minutes, everyone can understand that. But I sat there for nearly 40 minutes because I couldn't reverse out. I couldn't go forward. I just sat there. And and there was nothing to do. And I didn't use my phone, didn't look at my phone because I was in the driver's position. just for clarification. Just for clarification. And so I fully support this notice of motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypak. Any other councillor? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.5 on tonight's agenda is titled Arts Participation Opportunities, and I call on Councillor Marshall to present her second notice of motion.
Thank you. I would like to move that the CEO brings a report back to an ordinary council meeting by no later than April 2020. 1, summarising current options for the participation in all forms of art in Moonee Valley, including A, the creation of art by individuals, B, options for those participating in art to utilise facilities on a permanent or casual basis, C, current programs council runs, participates in or is aware of in Moonee Valley, 2, detailing future plans of the council to encourage and foster participation in arts in Moonee Valley, 3, to the extent the report identifies any gaps in opportunities, detailing how those gaps will be addressed, and 4, considering the creation of an online hub or portal either by council or in partnership with an organisation or a community group to enable an easy identification of arts participation opportunities in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for this notice of motion? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall.
you. Now, we know how valuable the arts are on a whole different range of measures. Obviously, the individual opportunities for participation and that reduction in social isolation, contribution to enriching the community more broadly, and even contribution to the economy if you just want to focus on the dollars. Last year, I had a range of different people approach me over the course of the year who were involved in arts in one way or another, and who were actually had various queries. And it became clear we've obviously, as we all know, got a really vibrant arts community in Moonee Valley. We've got various amateur theatre groups, choirs, drama clubs, musicians, creative artists, writers, all sorts of... you think of an art, we've got someone in Moonee Valley who does it. So I'd have those discussions, and after those discussions I'd follow up with officers and find out information from the officers about the queries that the people had had. And it became clear to me throughout the course of the year that we are actually doing a lot in this space, and I was probably surprised at some of the stuff that we were doing that I hadn't been aware of. And that's, both at an individual level, groups, and also by Moonee Valley Council directly or other councils too. And it was funny, we actually got a CEO update yesterday talking about the expressions of interest for the Clock Tower Centre's new studio residency program. We've got programs like that, we've got the podcast studio, the writer space, a whole range of things that we do that I'm just not sure enough people are aware about yet. Now, through those discussions and the follow-up, it became clear that people weren't aware of some of these opportunities, so that's obviously an issue. And there was also a concern, which I think is a really valid concern, about the lack of a space to actually create art and to store art-related materials and equipment where you're not having to drag it in and out. And that's probably something that has been identified as a bit of a gap in the discussions that I've had. So what this report does really, or is requesting a report to do a bit of a health check, so work out what are we currently doing, what should we be doing, and if there are areas that we aren't covering, should we be covering it, and how so? And also the idea of trying to create some sort of connection, and to me it seems as something that perhaps even it could be a valid grant application, is to look at that creation of an arts hub. So you're actually creating networks and joining people up, because there are lots of networks, but there are lots of people who participate in art who are solo. They want to create art mostly solo, but they also want to engage with other people and develop their networks. So that's probably about all I need to say. I hope councillors see fit to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack.
There's a really, really well-defined body of evidence that supports what Councillor Marshall is saying. In fact, community cultural development has been around for some time and goes to the very heart of what is being mentioned here. I think, if I want to sum it up, the council could really do so much in helping to create and helping to curate work that is of all sorts of types in the art context. Performing, visual, music, voice, literature, performing literature, sculpting, and of course now the whole digital revolution that's going on. And I think we're doing, as Councillor Marshall says, some great stuff. So somehow we need to bring that together, let people know what's going on, how they can use that, and actually do some thinking ourselves about where we can be really proactive in this. So, and there are, and as I said when I opened up about community cultural development, think just for a minute how much of art is about cross-cultural stuff, how much of it is about accessibility for people who are vulnerable in the community, or have also specific needs that aren't necessarily met through everyday activities around well-being and so on. And it's all age stuff and so on like that. Some of the areas that we could explore, besides obviously physical locations and things of that order, is the virtual world and think about how that we could hook people into the virtual world. We also, as a council, we have the great opportunity to talk to our arts people about mentoring, coaching, and so on like that. We have brilliant writers and so on like that. We're already doing terrific stuff through the libraries with writers coming and talking and presenting about their work and so on. But maybe this is just a way of us sort of somehow gathering this great big blancmange, sticking it back inside the mould a little bit, and being able to present it as something that's palatable for everybody. But I do think that I was in a cab today talking to a guy from Ethiopia who is a writer and a poet and has had 5 or 6 books published over there, but has no way of getting anything like that done here. And that's my example of the cab driver and that conversation. So it is very, very real, very real.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to support Councillor Marshall with this notice of motion. I must profess, I'm not an artistic person. I've been to a lot of art shows. I've been to a lot of poet reading, book launches, the whole lot. For me, I just haven't got that connection with any form of art. But what connection I do have is I see the passion, I see the love, and I see the fulfilment of people that actually attend this or who present there. And that is just gold for me. But to actually look at the art, I don't understand it, but I understand the people and I understand what it can do for a community. So happy to support it, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Marshall, for continuing to champion the arts. And I think it's very important that we don't forget about the arts, because sometimes I think as a council we are overly focused on sporting clubs and sporting pavilions, and the arts is often an afterthought, both in spend but also in the value we place in it. Point 3 is really important, because there's a lot of people in this municipality that have the experiences that will be able to tell us the gaps. And we ward councillors in Moonee Ward got an email recently from an artist or an art curator who identified many of those gaps. John, I'm not an overly arty person myself in terms of producing art, but I do appreciate it, and I do have somewhat of a vested interest. I do own a ceramic studio in Pascoe Vale South, and we get a lot of even Moonee Valley residents that come to us to fire their pottery, because there is actually no longer anywhere in Moonee Valley where people can just go and take work they've either made at home or made in classes and get it fired, and actually get it fired in a commercial kiln. So we've got a big, or 3 commercial kilns. The other side of that as well, which is, I think Councillor Cusack raised it, is people being able to store equipment as well. Councillor Marshall did. Again, in ceramics, the chemicals you need to mix glazes have to be stored securely, and it's not necessarily stuff that you're going to be carrying around on a tram. So that's another gap that I hope officers will be able to pick up on and look at, not just where people can make and produce art, but also where they can store finished art, works of items they're working on, but also the equipment required, and continue that support of our artists, because it's something that I think is an area that I think sometimes we gloss over a little bit as a council when we've got our sporting hats on. So I really commend you, Councillor Marshall. If you do have any pottery you want fired, I'll happily give you an address in Pascoe Vale South to come and visit, but I better not plug it in my council position, otherwise I'll get in trouble.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? No? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, now we are now up to item 12 on the agenda, which is urgent business. Do we have any urgent business tonight? No? Item 13 is delegates report. Are there any councillors that have anything they would like to report from delegates? Councillor Salinas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Wednesday I attended the Metropolitan Transport Forum meeting, which is held at the Melbourne City Council offices, where I'm pleased to say I was elected to the Executive Committee. So, very pleased. First meeting is this Friday at 8 a.m, so that's really something I'm looking forward to. But the guest speaker was Dr. Richard Yeo, who is the CEO of the ARRB, which is the Australian Road Research Board. And what he actually spoke about was giving an outline of what problems we're trying to solve and some of the tools and techniques available to solve these problems. But just one thing that I sort of took snapshots of that I was quite interested in was a topic that he raised, and it's called Time for Infrastructure Reset. And by doing that, what encompassed in that were things like mobility as a service, how we connect and how we're automated, shared spaces, innovative vehicles, safety, sustainability and a new economy. So he spoke to those items, and when the minutes come out I'll be able to give you some more information on them. I didn't bring my notes with me now, but it was quite fascinating, and he put up pictures of these tiny little vehicles which are single person vehicles. They're just, for one, a bit like a Jetsons car, you know, the Jetsons.
They're called microcars.
Microcars, that's it. That's
made
right.
in Sri Lanka.
Yes, and spoke about all these different accessible vehicles and how we need to look at, and he put up pictures of George Street in Sydney, how many years ago they had trams, and then they got rid of all the trams, and now the infrastructure reset, they've got trams again. So maybe we need to look at all those projects of what was okay and then we change it, but what was okay should have remained, and maybe we can go back into restructuring and looking at our infrastructure because of the changes of our traffic and our society and everything else. So it was really quite interesting.
I like that restructure.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Salinas. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. So I attended my first session for the Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group, the worst acronym ever. So it was really good. I had an induction session, which was useful. Then the elections happened, which was again all good, and the chair from last year is carrying over for this year. From a councillor from Darebin. So yes, so she was the only candidate for that position, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Sypex, apologies. So
Late in the day.
So it is late in the day. So we had...
Councillors, please.
So after the induction session, we had an overview from the CEO, which was really interesting. There's obviously a lot of people waiting with bated breath for the circular economy policy to be released, and I think that's meant to be released imminently. So, and there was talk about container deposit schemes, because obviously there's been a bit in the press lately, so we will be getting a container deposit scheme, but the importance of local governments having input into that, because again, if you think about the infrastructure that will be needed to actually implement good schemes, that certainly could have impacts on our land uses. So that's one of the things that at the Metropolitan Waste Group that we'll be looking at, but certainly I think as a council we also need to be thinking about that too once we get some more information. We had really interesting presentations from Hobson's Bay and Yarra about their glass recycling and how they'd gone, and it was it was quite fascinating. They talked about how they'd implemented it, the community engagement side of things, the rates of recovery and contamination. So certainly if that was a path that we elected to go down, they've got a lot of information and certainly expressed a readiness and willingness to share. And it was really quite interesting too to see in Yarra they'd chosen a very specific, nice mixed group to trial. and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive from that group. So, it was a really interesting session, and I look forward to the next forum in a few months' time.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Any other councillor? No? Thank you. Now, the next item of business on the agenda is confidential reports, and we don't have any this evening, so therefore that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you to members of the gallery, and thank you for everyone tuning in at home, and I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Use a gap.